For months, we've been digging into ATF's controversial Fast and Furious case.
For the first time tonight, only on ABC 15, investigator Lori Jane Gliha shows you proof the assault weapons linked to that program are showing up in our neighborhoods.
Endangered the American public.
It appears the investigation was conducted in a recklessly planned manner.
We weren't giving guns to people who were hunting bear. We were giving guns to people who were killing other humans.
They are Phoenix ATF agents talking about high-powered assault rifles. Guns like the weapons found at the murder scene of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, shot in the back just before Christmas.
Do you solemnly swear?
ATF agents in Phoenix say for months they knowingly allowed thousands of these guns to slip into the hands of buyers who would distribute the weapons to known criminals.
It made no sense to us either. It's just what we were ordered to do, and every time we questioned that order, there was punitive action.
It was part of a strategy intended to lead investigators to drug lords in Mexico. But agents involved say they never actually followed the weapons to see where they ended up.
How many weapons do we have that we do not know where they are?
Anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500, 1,800 guns.
We spent months digging for clues in police reports and government documents, and then we uncovered proof that some of these high-powered weapons allowed to slip through the cracks are connected to dangerous crimes and turning up in neighborhoods right here in the valley.
This was a catastrophic disaster.
These police reports prove assault weapons connected to a large-scale marijuana trafficking operation and other crimes in our area were some of the same weapons ATF agents allowed to slip away. We sorted through police photographs and reports and identified serial numbers on the guns. Then we matched the serial numbers to official ATF documents. Guns connected to at least 2 Glendale cases and at least 2 Phoenix cases also appear on a sort of ATF watch list called the Suspect Gun Database. Dates printed on at least 3 ATF suspect gun summary documents prove agents allowed the suspicious gun sales months before those same weapons turned up at the Glendale and Phoenix crime scenes. And these reports show just days after a buyer under ATF surveillance purchased this weapon, it turned up in someone else's possession at the scene of a drug crime.
I don't see how that happens. If they're aware of it, why are they not doing something about it, confiscating them before things like this happen in a neighborhood?
Margaret Meyer's Glendale house is on the same street where police found several bales of marijuana and at least 1 high-powered rifle that slipped by the ATF. It's the same neighborhood near 73rd Avenue and Bethany Home Road where Kirsten Adams' children play.
That's unsettling. Absolutely.
Our investigation found other weapons linked to the controversial ATF strategy turning up near 83rd Avenue and McDowell in Phoenix, 43rd Avenue and Camelback in Phoenix, and we found a gun linked to drug crimes at homes near these locations in Phoenix and Glendale.
Who knows where they're going to end up? And in fact, there's ample evidence even besides your own investigation that they've been used on crimes on this side of the border. But how many? I can't give you a figure.
Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley told us he's collecting evidence, trying to find out which leaders knew about the ATF strategy and when. And in early June, he sent public records requests to every county sheriff and every major police department in the valley in an effort to track what may be hundreds of other illegally purchased guns in our state. Weapons ATF agents say they knowingly let fall into the hands of criminals.
With people like you down there in Arizona investigating this, and with Congressman Isa and this senator on the case, they know we aren't going to give up.
I believe that these firearms will continue to turn up at crime scenes on both sides of the border for years to come.
The ATF denied our Freedom of Information Act request for information about other weapons that have slipped through the cracks and have been linked to Valley crimes. And they refused to comment on what we uncovered, saying it's still part of an open investigation. Meanwhile, what do you think about this ATF strategy? Who should be held responsible, if anyone? Log on to our Facebook page to give us your thoughts. I'm investigator Lori Jane Gliha, ABC 15 News. The list of guns in this federal court document contains the names and serial numbers of more than 40 assault weapons. Many look similar to these. The weapons turned up at the scene of a Drug Enforcement Administration traffic stop in mid-April. Agents made the bust near the Tolleson-Phoenix border at 83rd Avenue and the I-10 freeway. The ABC 15 investigators uncovered documents showing those guns are also linked to a questionable ATF case called Fast and Furious, a case in which agents knowingly let guns slip into the hands of criminals. These ATF suspect gun summary documents contain lists of suspicious gun sales and buyers, a sort of ATF watch list. We matched gun serial numbers on the watch list with guns recovered in the April bust. These documents prove at least 43 of the weapons recovered in the bust are also connected to the ATF Fast and Furious case. DEA agents discovered drugs at the scene, and this court record shows 4 of the men arrested with some of the guns were in the country illegally.
The ABC station in Phoenix for last week reported on several of these weapons.
ABC News senior White House correspondent Jake Tapper pressed the president's press secretary for answers.
How come we know so little, the public knows so little about this program, and what is the administration doing to get to the bottom of these weapons?
I think there's an investigation going on precisely to get to the bottom of this.
Is this not something that you guys are worried about and incensed about? This is something that...
Well, Jake, I think it's being investigated for a reason.
Also this week, there are new allegations from congressional leaders questioning whether the FBI and the DEA had paid informants involved in the operation in some way. The Assistant Attorney General released a response explaining the Justice Department is working on the best way to share information about those concerns without compromising any investigation. I'm investigator Lori J. Leha, ABC 15 News.
The plan was supposed to lead federal agents to drug cartels in Mexico, but agents in the Valley admit the so-called Fast and Furious case fell apart and mistakes were made. In the hot seat on Capitol Hill, the former special agent in charge of the ATF's Phoenix field office. ABC 15 investigator Lori Jane Gleha, the only local reporter there, and tonight she has new details revealed by agents on both sides of the border.
I don't understand what happened after that or what your system was in order to follow where those guns went.
Well, sir, it wasn't my system.
In a sometimes uncomfortable and awkward hearing that lasted nearly 5 hours,
there's got to be a system.
Congressional leaders with the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee tried desperately to learn how the controversial Fast and Furious case came to be.
At no time in our strategy was it to allow guns to be taken to Mexico. No, sir.
6 ATF officials testified about the case, including ATF officials stationed in Mexico.
That is insane. Inconceivable.
Carlos Canino, the acting attaché to Mexico, testified ATF agents stationed in Mexico were kept in the dark about the strategy in which their counterparts in Phoenix admitted to allowing weapons to walk into the hands of criminals.
We weren't aware of the technique that ATF agents were actually following known gun traffickers away and letting them go.
Most of the questions, however, went across the witness table to former Phoenix ATF Special Agent in Charge Bill Newell and Bill McMahon, the Deputy Assistant Director of the Office of ATF Field Operations, who admitted he wishes he could have better reviewed paperwork that came across his desk.
There are questions now of who else might be called to testify in a future hearing. There's talk of whether the U.S. Attorney in Phoenix may be called to testify. I also asked Ranking Member Cummings who he'd like to see in the hot seat next, and he said the acting ATF Director Ken Melson already provided some testimony, but that was not in front of the public. In Washington, D.C., Lori Jane Gleha, ABC 15 News.
Breaking news right now coming to us into the ABC15.com or ABC 15 newsroom. And Lori Jane Gleha, you've been working on this investigation for months coming out of the Department of Justice. What are you hearing?
Well, this is all pertaining to the ATF. We've been reporting on this for several months, that there had been some issues with the ATF in which ATF agents had admitted to watching guns get into the hands of criminals. There's been lots of congressional hearings that have happened, and now we've learned that the acting director, Kenneth Melson, we've got his picture up here on the computer for you, he has now been reassigned within the Department of Justice, and he is now going to be reassigned to the senior advisor position of forensic science in the Office of Legal Policy. Now, this is a big deal. He's going to be replaced by the U.S. Attorney from Minnesota, but we're also hearing that there's some other change-ups possibly affecting the U.S. Attorney here in Arizona. In fact, one of the key representatives who's been involved in this investigation, Representative Darrell Issa, actually put out a press release just a couple of moments ago. I just printed it out, and he's making a statement, and it says, on the resignation of the Arizona U.S. Attorney and the reassignment of the ATF director. So we're trying to confirm with the U.S. Attorney's office here whether Dennis Burke is being affected and whether his deputy, Emery Hurley, who is also key in this investigation, whether or not he is being reassigned or moved at all. I've got 3 calls in and an email, so hopefully we'll get a hold of them soon so we can get some confirmation of what's going on.
The ABC 15 investigators breaking new details today in the ATF's controversial Fast and Furious case. They now linked a dangerous violent crime in Pinal County to a weapon that was walked by the ATF. ATF. Investigator Lori Jane Gliha explains his crime ended with officers opening fire.
The story starts in March 2010 with a stolen truck and a pursuit similar to this one. Arizona Department of Public Safety Vehicle Theft Task Force officers followed a stolen F-350 to Maricopa, and when they tried to pull the driver over, they say he rammed two undercover vehicles trying to get away. Court paperwork shows police eventually arrested Angel Hernandez Diaz. He's facing multiple charges, including aggravated assault on a police officer. Sources tell me the suspect pointed a gun at an officer, and the officer fired a shot at Diaz but didn't hit him. Later, police found two other weapons inside the stolen truck, an AK-47 and a Beretta pistol. ATF officials confirmed to the ABC 15 investigators the AK-47 is connected to the controversial Fast and Furious case, the case in which agents admitted to letting guns get into the hands of criminals.
Last week, the Department of Justice announced it could only connect 3 firearms to violent crimes in the United States, and we now know one of those weapons is the one from the Maricopa scene. The other 2 turned up at the murder scene of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry back in December. The ABC 15 investigators have also linked nearly 50 weapons to nonviolent crimes right here in the Valley, and you can read more about the case at abc15.com/investigators. I'm investigator Lori Jane Gliha, ABC 15 News. The hearing in the nation's capital lasted more than 4 hours. One Republican congressman called for heads to roll within the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, Attorney General Eric Holder insists people will be held accountable for mistakes that were made.
As I have repeatedly stated, allowing guns to walk, whether in this administration or the prior one, is wholly unacceptable.
Attorney General Eric Holder insists the Justice Department is fully cooperative with congressional investigators and wants to make sure a case like Fast and Furious never happens again. It's the case in which Phoenix ATF agents admitted to allowing guns into the hands of criminals. Republicans want the AG to take responsibility.
Do you think the buck stops with you?
I'm ultimately responsible for all of the actions that occur within the department.
Representative Jim Sensenbrenner called for heads to roll, however, asking for an assistant attorney general to be fired. He even suggested the possibility of impeaching someone, though he never specified who.
I think it won't come to that.
Arizona Congressman Trent Franks previously called for Holder's resignation and says anyone connected to the case should also be held accountable.
Will you be resigning because of the fallout from Fast and Furious?
I have no intention of resigning. I'm the Attorney General who put an end to these misguided tactics that were used in Fast and Furious.
The Attorney General, meanwhile, asked for help combating gun trafficking. He says that includes enhanced legislation for long guns, consistent with what we have for handguns. He also says he would like more funding to put more ATF agents on the Arizona and Southwest border. And he says it is time that the ATF have a permanent leader, something that the agency has been without for many years. In Washington, D.C., I'm investigator Lori Jane Gliha, ABC 15 News.